And welcome back. As promised, I bring you along and show you the contents of our Procharger supercharger as we do the unboxing here. Now remember, this is for a Ram 1500. It's going to go on our 2012, and this is what Procharger calls their tuner kit. So the contents of this box will be identical to the kit you would buy, the non-tuner kit, if you're going to put this on a stock Hemi engine. Now the only difference is being on the tuner kit, remember, it doesn't come with fuel system components. So it won't have the fuel injectors in this box, and it won't have a tuner in this box, but all the other parts should be the same. Now there'll be a couple optional accessories inside this box that we did purchase. One of them is the map sensor. That is still needed regardless of whether you're doing a tuner kit or non-tuner kits or fuel injectors. But also on the tuner kit, it didn't list that modified 2-bar map sensors being in it, and I did have to order that separately, and that should be inside the box here. Another option, and I'll point that out when we get to it, is going to be the optional steel braided drain line. So what this will do is this will take the place of the oil drain plug on the bottom of the head unit and allow us to put in, I believe it's about a 3-foot steel braided line that we can then route elsewhere to make it easier when it comes time to do the oil changes in the head unit itself. So with that being said, what I'm going to do is go ahead and you can see it comes nicely packaged, well secured. We got these nice straps here to kind of hold everything together. I'm going to get these straps cut, and you'll always see them, or at least I've always had this experience with the Procharger kits I've ordered. They always have it clearly labeled as to which side of the box is up, and they do suggest that you open it immediately just to make sure there's no missing pieces. It does say claims for parts and shortages will not be accepted after 5 business days from delivery. Yes, and unfortunately it's been past 5 days, so hopefully we don't run into an issue. Although I can't speak for everyone's experience. Every time I've ever called Procharger with an issue, you know, they've bent over backwards to address it. Unfortunately, we were out of town when this came in, and of course the 5 days has since lapsed before we could get back to this. Well, without further ado, I'm going to get these straps cut. I'm going to get these box cut open, and this will be the top flap here that we're going to open, and I'll bring you back in a moment. And welcome back. So you're seeing the box as it sits, literally with just the flaps themselves open, and as you can see, the box more than covers what it needs to cover. Like I said, they don't skimp when it comes to the protective packaging on these units. You can see that we've got plenty of just packing filler. And what's going to be inside, let me bring you down here to show you this. What's going to be inside this nice big styrofoam block here. This is going to be the belt they give you. Now this is the 8 rib belt, as you can see here. This is going to be the dedicated belt for the head unit itself. You can see it's nice and wide. It obviously says 8 rib there. Now usually what I like to do is, and I'll do the same here, is that, you know, this is looks like it's a bandeau belt. This is kind of unusual. Normally they go with Gates belts in these. So maybe, I'm not sure if Gates just doesn't have an 8 rib belt in this, but now that we've got the part number here, this 8PK 1700, what I normally like to do is go out and order a Gates supercharger belt. So that's not a dig on the company, it's not a dig on their setups. It's that you know, Gates has a standard dry belt, they have a green belt, which is the heavy duty belt, but then they also have a what they call their supercharger belt, which is supposedly, you know, specially created for use in superchargers. It's what I used on the 2500 when we did the supercharger on it. Instead of using a standard belt, I just want to get a Gates supercharger one. But I'll bring you along when we look at that. but we'll use this one as a kind of a parts gauge to see if we could get the equivalent one. Again, it's not a dig on this. It's not saying that this won't get the job done. It's just they do make a, Gates does actually make a supercharger belt for these exact type applications. I guess it's interesting because I know they'd been using Gates belts exclusively for a while, so maybe they couldn't get a hold of it. Maybe it's a supply chain issue. I mean, this belt says it's made in Japan. It's put out by a company called Bando. Again, I can't speak for them. I've never used their belts before, but I guess we'll see. And inside this nice big block of foam that you see here, that is where the meat of the money is at. Is that nice big supercharger you see there. So let me do this. Let me get you situated with the camera, and then we'll bring you back and we'll look more into, I'll get this pulled out of this nice big protective piece of foam shipper, and then we get a better look at it. One moment. And welcome back. So what you can see, this was also here on the kind of the side of the supercharger box, and I should say the foam pad for the supercharger head. And obviously each kit comes with this kind of Tyvek envelope in it. Of course, a license plate bracket if you're into putting license plate brackets in your car and, you know, offering up a little bit of free advertisement, I guess. I normally don't use these on vehicles. I typically don't like these little license plate frames. It's just me, it's personal preference. But let me get this envelope opened, and then we'll go over real quick what normally is inside of here. There'll be a couple of items. One will usually be the installation manual for the particular kit that you have. And another bit will be a little business card. So we get a nice little kind of a, let me see what you're seeing here. You'll get a nice kind of little thank you, a laminated card that's got all of their contact phone numbers on it. And of course, where you can pick up additional Procharger items. You'll also get I'm just going to cover that mine up here. You'll also get this here, which comes with the business card, and you'll see the serial number for your head unit, handwritten normally on this card. Keep track of this book and this serial number. You will need that serial number if you ever need to contact them with issues about your particular kit. And this book, also, just to show you, comes with some free decals if you're into those, as well as the installation kit for the particular box we're dealing with. In this case, this covers a 2009 to 2018 Dodge Ram Stage 2. Remember, this is Stage 2 because the dedicated 8-rib system intercooled kit. And of course, it's the step-by-step installation manual. I'll show you this here. Very, very nice manual. You can see full color manual, step-by-step pictures. They do a really, really excellent job of helping you through these installs. And when you're doing this install, if you ever run into an issue, what you can do is just contact their tech support, send them some pictures of kind of what you're looking at, and they'll do an excellent job of helping you out and assisting you with whatever issue you may be running into. Now, over here on top, this is going to be for the head unit itself. So these head units, they ship empty or no dry, however you want to call it. And what we'll have to do is when you get this unit installed, you'll then just have to remember that it does have to be filled. Otherwise, you'll be headed for a bad day if you forget to fill that before you start using it. In this case, this will be the filter for our head unit. You can see they even give you 3 more bottles of oil. So that way you're covered for the very first install of oil, as well as the 3 additional oil changes from there. And on the outside of this box, make sure you keep up with this as well. You see there's a spare O-ring and a spare nylon washer that is for the dipstick tube that's built into the head unit. So in the event that ever leaks or you lose it, they give you a spare one on the box. Now let's see if we can get this head unit out of here. There we go. Very important. You can see they give you a nice spacer on there to keep anything from hitting this end of the supercharger head unit and bending those fins in. You get a nice view down in there of our impeller. And of course, there's your warning that you need to add 6 ounces of oil before you begin. And you can see that nice monstrous 8-groove pulley on the end of that unit. So again, this is what the belt's going to spin. It's going to suck in air through that impeller, and of course discharge it from that end of the supercharger, and then it'll be headed towards using various piping, which is also included here in the kit, which you'll see here in a minute, and that'll eventually get it into the intercooler before it heads to the intake. Now, on the bottom of the head unit, just to show you, that's the drain plug. Now, the optional oil draining line kit is, at least on this particular, and each head unit is going to be a little bit different, but on this one, we'll eventually take this plug out and we'll replace it with a remote oil line. So if you didn't have the oil line, then what you would have to do is get access to this to basically drain the oil out and then put that plug back in. But again, they make an optional kit, and I'll show you here in a minute, that makes this a bit easier. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and put this head unit back in the box, because we definitely don't want anything to happen to that piece. Actually, any piece in this kit we don't want anything to happen to, but we especially don't want anything to happen to that piece. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to shut you down real quick. I'm going to swing you around the other side of the box, and we'll start digging through the rest of our goodies here. And welcome back. I apologize because this is probably the worst unboxing video in the world, but I figured, you know, you might like to see kind of the contents of how these show up. Again, I'm just trying to emphasize here that these are extremely well packaged. So what you see here are some items that we've unwrapped, and just to show you, you can see you've got several of these, all like almost individually wrapped components. So it does take a while to kind of go through all this and get everything unwrapped and accounted for. But I wanted to show you some of the items that we've taken out thus far. Now, this is an item that didn't come with the tuner kit, that had to be ordered separately. And this is that for 0910 Dodge Ram MAP SRT4. Now, what you're seeing in here is a MAP sensor for a Chrysler SRT4 that's been modified, and they give you this nice billet adapter. And what this MAP sensor bolts into this adapter, and then this adapter then fits into the standard Ram 1500 intake. It's also the same setup for the Ram 2500 as well. And you can see that we've got various spacers inside this kit as well. Now, since this kit was purchased separately, you'll notice this one comes with its own little kind of set of instructions. And these spacers, if I'm not mistaken, and we'll get into this, you see how you have like a little cone spacer here and these thicker spacers here? What this is, these are spacers that need to go into the fuel rail. Because we're putting in larger injectors that, if I remember correctly, are just a scooch taller than the normal factory ones for 1500, you have to make up for that space, and you end up actually spacing the fuel rail a little bit higher up off the intake, and we'll get into all that, and I'll show you what I mean, and when we get to that part of the install it'll make sense. But that is the stud piece that would normally be on the front driver's side fuel rail that the engine cover would snap into. So they're even thoughtful enough to give you everything you need in this kit to take care of the fuel rail, the map sensor, as well as that additional ball stud that you need on that far corner for the engine cover to snap into place too. And again, just remember that if you're getting the tuner type kit, you're going to need one of these for 1500 as well. And this one is sold separately. Now, if you get the non-tuner kit and you're getting the full-on kit you would normally put onto what they consider a stock 1500, then it will come with this modified map sensor. You don't have to buy it separately. Now, another piece of kit here. This is the oil drain line that I was talking to you about earlier. This one is optional regardless of the kit. Unless you order this, it won't come with either the tuner or the non-tuner kit, but it does make it phenomenally easier on these head units to do the oil change. Because you can see that is the piece that'll go on the bottom of the head unit. That is the piece that you can then route elsewhere, and you can use this one to, again, remotely drain the oil out of that unit so you don't have to get right up to it. And again, we'll cover all that when we get to doing the actual kit install. You can see here's our pinning kit. Now what this is that in order to keep potentially the crank pulley from spinning on the crankshaft, you have to pin it. This is true whether it's 2500 or 1500, and they give you an entire kit, which basically, and we'll cover all this, but what you're doing is you're drilling a hole between the crank pulley and the actual crank, and you're pinning those together, so that way as you're spinning things up and it's got that load of the supercharger on it, you don't run the risk of it slipping. Now, I don't think we necessarily need this particular pinning kit. We'll cover this a bit better. No, it actually does say Ram 1300. Now this says 13 plus Dodge Ram Stage 2. Yeah, I'll have to do a little bit more research on this, because remember, we're running the ATI pulley, and the ATI pulley has its own pinning procedure, if I remember correctly. They may be using this pinning procedure, or it may come with one. We'll get to doing that part of the install, but either way, the reason why you're pinning the crank pulley to the crank is to avoid the crank pulley from spinning on the crankshaft, because it's got the extra drag and forces that come along with spinning up that supercharger. And especially if you're wide open throttle and you got a pull going and you snap off the throttle, yeah, you got a blow off valve that'll get rid of the excess pressure, but that supercharger, remember, has got a lot of centrifugal force that's still trying to make it spin forward, and there's a potential there that, you know, you could spin the crank pulley on the crank. Now, this is what I was hoping to see, and one of the items we talked about when we did one of the parts videos is that ATI balancer. Now, you see here, that is an 8-rib pulley. So it's 09 plus Dodge Ram Stage 2. So if you're not getting the Stage 2 kit, you won't have this pulley. But you can see it's a 7.65 inch pulley. So what's going to happen with this is that this is going to bolt to the front of the ATI pulley that we ordered in. So the ATI pulley will get mounted to the crank. We'll bolt this to the front of that. This will then either drive the supercharger head unit, or it'll drive the accessories, one of the two. I bet you this one will more than likely be used to drive the head unit, and the pulley that comes on the ATI balancer will then be used for the accessories. But again, we'll confirm all that when we get to it. So it basically means the crank pulley on the ATI balancer is also 8 rib, just like this one. But it just means that when that one on the ATI balancer is looped into the accessories, it just means it'll just be running a 6 ribbed belt for the accessories instead of an 8. So it'll look kind of odd, but it'll be fine. And that is your purge sys bag, what this is. And according to Procharger, when I talked to them, I think they said this was good to about 900 horsepower. What this is that this is your blow-off valve. For another way of saying it, they call this particular one a purge system. So if you're going wide open throttle, and let's say you're generating a full 7-8 pounds of boost, whatever the case may be, and all of a sudden you let up off the throttle. Well, remember that supercharger was still producing full boost. So you let up off the throttle, and the throttle plate and the intake slap shut because you no longer need air or fuel because you're coming to a stop. What will happen is this will bleed off the excess pressure out of the intercool system and basically keep it from surging the supercharger. If you've ever heard a turbocharger or a supercharged car go down the road and they're getting on the throttle and all of a sudden they get off of the throttle and you kind of hear it go whoop, 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 and what's happening is the pressure that they were building, the boost they were building, they don't have a bypass valve or a pop-off valve installed. So what's happening is you're no longer up on the RPMs. So the drive belt is trying to slow down the supercharger or the turbocharger, but yet you have pressure there. So that 7 to 8 PSI of pressure is still trying to drive, or it tries to go backwards into the supercharger, basically stopping it. It could literally feed backwards into the supercharger and cause that supercharger to stop spinning. So that's why you hear that intermittent whoop, 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 whoop when somebody comes off the throttle. It's actually kind of a very bad thing to do because you can damage a supercharger fairly quickly. So what that pop-off valve again will do is if you come off a wide open throttle and that throttle plate and the intake slap shut, that valve will open, take that 7 to 8 PSI that we're generating and basically just discharge it to the outside air, preventing that pressure from coming back and trying to backfeed into the head unit. Now, the bulk of what's left inside this kit, just to show you, again, it's all kind of individually wrapped here. There's our cooling system that a 1500 uses. And what happens here is that you can see that this is cooling system bag, and this is actually going to be, if I remember correctly, the return tank, if I remember correctly. Is what happens is, in order to make the room needed to run the intercool piping, you remove the factory overfill tank for the radiator and you replace it with this guy right here. And you'll see why when we get into doing the install part of this. And what we should have here is just pieces of our intercool piping. In this case, it is a, you can see it's marked Camaro, but this is just a discharge pipe. So a lot of what is in here, as you can see, is just individually wrapped bags, and this is going to be all the tubing and the accessories needed to put the intercooler in. I'm trying to find so I can show you, and again, you're not really missing anything. We're not going to go through each one of these bags individually. We'll cover that more in the install, but just to show you, it is more. I want to get this one out because this is a cool one. Again, individually wrapped. You can see the box down there. What is inside this box right here is the intercooler that gets mounted behind the bumper. But this is the meat of your hardware bag. And what this is a big old thick mounting bracket that the head unit mounts to. This bracket mounts to the engine block, and then the head unit bolts to this. So this is a fairly thick and beefy milled bracket. And just like our head unit, you'll notice, I forgot to point it out, but you'll notice in the previous shot, the head unit was black. You'll see all of our mounting accessories are also black. Be advised that getting them painted black is an extra charge. They normally come, I believe it's matte satin is the standard color, or the standard color that comes in without the additional charge. So if you want them painted black, just be aware there is additional charge for that. And more of this. You can see here, this is more just intercooled piping. And I believe this is more the same. Yeah, it's more metal intercooled piping. And hopefully you can see that a little bit better. So yeah, this is the intercooler itself. I don't necessarily want to take, I don't know, I guess we can see if we can get a gander on it. Yeah, we can look on this side of it and at least see it. So you can see that there's just the input and the output of a nice, big, beefy, you know, all aluminum intercooler. And this will mount, like I said, behind the grill. Usually in front of the radiator is where that'll mount, and that way it's just, again, it just helps to get airflow over it, and it helps to cool the supercharged air coming out of the head unit before it goes into the intake. Because remember, when you take air and you compress it, you also heat it up. So you don't really want excessively hot air going into your intake, because it doesn't burn as efficient or as clean. The colder you can make the air, the more dense it is. The more dense, the more you can get into that cylinder for use in making power. And if the air is hot, it's kind of counterproductive. So the intercooler will help cool things down before it gets into the intake and thus into the cylinders. So I know this was a lot of rambling, but I wanted to show you, and you can see here that when you order one of these kits, you do get what you pay for, in my opinion. You can see that all of the individual bits and pieces and the components are wrapped. Again, the pieces that we didn't unwrap are just more of the piping necessary for the intercooler itself. So one of the things you definitely want to do when you get one of these kits in is go through all of the packages that you see, make sure you don't have any missing pieces, and if you do, contact them right away. And again, we covered the fact that they give you the initial bottle of oil for the initial fill, plus they give you 3 more bottles of oil for additional changes in the future. And we covered a couple of the optional extra items, which is that remote oil drain line. Let me grab that one again. Show you that one. And again, this is extra. This costs extra whether you get a tuner kit or a non-tuner kit. Again, it just makes it a lot easier and more convenient to change the oil in the head units. Or I should say, this is extra, at least for the Ram kits that I've dealt with. This piece has always been extra. I don't think they make a kit where this comes as standard. They might, and if they do, please let me know in the comments below. And of course, again, just something to keep mindful of on the tuner kits is that this is the map, or modified map sensor, or SRT4 map sensor. Again, this is needed because the map sensor on a standard 1500 cannot read the positive boost levels that supercharger is going to generate. Again, this is not included in the tuner kit. This had to be purchased separate. But if you're getting the non-tuner kit, the full kit that comes with the fuel system components, meaning the fuel injectors, it'll also come with that map sensor. You won't have to purchase that separately. And this, again, this is the standard purge valve that comes with the kits. And again, I talked to the pre-sale support, and they said this particular valve is good to about 900 horsepower. I believe that's what he said, if I remember correctly. If that's incorrect, Procharger, please comment below and let me know. But they do make alternate purge valves. They make racing purge valves, where if you need something that's a bit more stout than this, or maybe a bit more responsive than this, you can purchase at additional cost a different variation of this valve. But this is the standard one that comes with the kit. I've been running this one now for the last probably 4 years on our 2500, and you know, it's been fine. I've had no issues with it. And I think that was the pieces that I wanted to point out to you. Again, I just wanted to show you that I can't sing the praises of their packaging enough. But just to show you, even the bottom of the box has got egg crate foam in it to help protect the pieces. And you can see that nice massive block of foam once again that the head unit itself gets buried into, again, just helping to keep any possible damages from taking place with these kits when they're shipped. But with that being said, we will definitely get into more details on this as we get to the point that we go to install this onto our 2012 1500. It'll be a little bit before we get to that, so be patient with me. There'll be videos that the next video coming out should be us starting to do the prep work to pull the engine out of the 2012, strip it down, and get it to the machine shop and let them do their bits and pieces to it. So this, I think this is going to be a pretty exciting build. It's definitely for this channel going to be one of the more horsepower driven builds that we've done to date, and look forward to seeing you along for the ride. But with that being said, if you have not subscribed, please consider to do so. For everyone that has, I thank you immensely. And with that being said, I will bring you back for the next one. Thank you much. Bye.